the Three Kings Day, still, when is that? Oh, okay, so it's done. So at some point, this needs to come down. Although this is kind of nice. I have some sort of a seal, like the president. I have a wreath. As I was saying I wasn't saying that. I was saying a while ago, this past week has been filled with talks about money because of the Powerball, because of all these things that are happening. And also last Friday, Lovely texted me and lovingly said, Pastor Jay, it's been a hectic end to 2015. We haven't done the budget yet. Would you be able to provide ministry's budget by the 17th? Really, I think what Lovely wants to say is, Pastor Jay, I better have a budget from you by next week. And that's fine. Lovely, you can tell me that. You don't have to be loving about it. You can just tell me that. Last Wednesday at the prayer meeting, we were talking about the dangers of stereotypes, of stereotyping people. And so we were all sharing stereotypical stories about churches and all that, and churches or cultures and races and all that. And so we were discussing, and it was a lively discussion. That really wasn't the topic for the Bible or the devotion that night, but it kind of went to that. Fritz was saying maybe we just wanted to vent out something, and that's fine. But stereotypical stories, and when that word came to me, and what the Lord wants to share with us, or wants to tell us, not just share, but tell us this morning, it made me remember stereotypical stories about offerings, about money, about tithes. And I always go back, whenever I think of churches and their resources and all that, I always go back to my father's favorite story whenever he gives a sermon or an illustration about churches and their money. And so Pastor Ilano used to go like this: a priest, a pastor, and a rabbi. That's how he starts it off. And it's funny. It depends on what church invites him, because he will always say a priest, a Baptist pastor, or a Methodist minister. And so he kind of puts that there. So I'm just going to go with a priest, a pastor, and a rabbi had a joint service, and they talked about how they divide the offering. I'm like, how do you guys divide the offering? What goes to the Lord and what stays with the church? I don't really know how that works, but anyway, they were talking about how they divide the offering. And so the Catholic priest said, oh, well, what we do is that we go to the altar and we put a huge circle on the altar. We draw a circle on the altar, and we throw all the money that we get during offering. We throw all the money towards the circle. What stays inside belongs to God. What goes outside the circle belongs to us. And so that's what the Catholic priest said. The Protestant pastor said, well, we kind of do sort of the same thing, but this is what we do. We put everything, all the offerings in a plate, and we draw a line in the middle. Whatever's on the left belongs to God. Whatever's on the right is ours. Finally, the Jewish rabbi said, well, we don't do it exactly like that, but it has something to do with a plate as well. And the Jewish rabbi said, we put our offering on a plate, and this is what we do. We throw everything upwards. What stays up is God's. What comes down is ours. It's a stereotypical story about how we view Catholic priests and how we view Protestant ministers, and especially how we view Jewish rabbis. And when my father starts off his sermon like this, the whole church knows that today's message or that day's message is going to be about giving. Maybe in nicer terms, he will call it stewardship. And everyone has this look, I know, because I also feel it. And I was young then, and I was listening to him, and I would have this very awkward moment. And so let me do one right now. I have an announcement to make right now. Today, I will talk about your giving and my giving. You see how awkward that is? You see how this huge silence, I don't expect it to be, clapping and rejoicing, but it brings about silence whenever pastors, ministers talk about giving. Many churches refuse to speak about giving, about the management of money, and about how much you give during offering and how much you keep to yourself. Many pastors over the years have lost their jobs because of this sermon or sermons like this. My own mother will probably denounce me, what I'm about to talk about. And we can all cringe and faint and laugh nervously or fall asleep right now, or take this as God's message for all of us today. And I'm hoping that you will do the latter. I want you to turn to Luke chapter 16, verses 1 to 15. In Luke, Luke, the writer, shares with us these parables that the Lord has taught, either just his disciples, or obviously not just his disciples, but everyone else who was traveling with him. So it starts off like this, Luke 16, verses 1 to 15. And some of you will probably have a heading that says, Parable of the what? The what? The shrewd manager. Very good. So Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. Do we have the same, I hope I copied the same translation. So, verse 2, so he called him in and asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management because you cannot be manager any longer. The manager said to himself, well, what shall I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. So he called in each of his master's debtors, those people who owe the master money. He asked the first, how much, or resources, how much do you owe my master? Verse 6, 900 gallons of olive oil, he replied. The manager told him, well, take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 450. It was cut in half, right? At least I can do the math. Then he asked the second, how much do you owe? 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, take your bill, make it 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. I tell you, Jesus said, use your worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. The Pharisees who loved money heard all this and were sneering at Jesus, and he said to them, you are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your hearts. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight. If you kind of look back at that story, and if I tell it again in our own words, you imagine the first scene, which is in the master's office or in the owner's office. We don't call them masters anymore unless you call your boss your master. But, your bosses or your owners, the owner's office. And in this scene, the main characters are introduced. The first one is the master. He's a wealthy Middle Eastern landowner. And people have come to him and tell him, remember he said, what is this I hear? So people have come to him and have told him that his manager is cheating him. The tense of the verb in the original language actually indicates that the manager was embezzling, not just cheating. There's always something bigger and more negative about embezzling. if someone comes to you and says, you're a cheater, whether or not that's true, that's your story, or that's my story. But if someone comes up to you or me and says, you're an embezzler, that's worse, isn't it? It sounds worse at least. But the tense on that verb in the original language indicates that the manager was accused repeatedly of embezzling money from the owner. In Jesus' story, the master doesn't berate the manager, if you notice that. Instead, he actually asks him calmly and graciously to what? Give an account of your management. He doesn't scold the manager. He doesn't threaten the manager. He doesn't demand repayment. He doesn't put the manager in jail, which maybe he should. And so that's the character of the master. Now, the second character is the manager that is being presented here. And what he does for a living is managing property and assets that don't belong to him. And only he's not really managing them, but he's mismanaging them. The master calls the manager into his office and says, what is this I hear about you? So the master delivers the second sentence because the manager doesn't say anything. So the owner delivers the second sentence, and this is what he's going to do. I'm going to fire you, in other words. You cannot be manager any longer. Now, what is the manager going to do? And I don't know about you, but how many times have you come to the office and the owner or the director or the HR tells you that you are going to be either terminated today or you are given 2 weeks to look for a job, or what else have they said nicely and kindly? Because of the budget, we don't need your services anymore, or because something else have come up and your position is no longer going to be here. And so whatever they want to say and however they want to put it, on the side, I have a friend a teacher friend. We used to, both of us, to teach in some school in West Covina that I won't mention to you. But anyway, and the first one to be let go is her. And if you remember, a couple years ago, I was I can't even remember the what's the word? I was not let go. Laid off. Okay, not terminated. That's two different things. So I was laid off, but she went first 2, 3, 6 months before me. And it's funny, she was telling me that, I said, so how did they word it? Instead of saying you're laid off or your position is not available anymore, the HR manager actually said, these people just don't like you. That's how she got the news, that she is no longer there. But this manager is saying, while he's walking away, his mind hatches a plan based on everything he knows about the master. And so his thinking goes like this: I have been manipulating another man's money for years, and everyone around here knows it. So, I'm too weak for manual labor. He's thinking, what am I going to do for a job? I'm too weak for manual labor, and begging is beneath my social station. So what am I going to do? He says to himself. So he thinks and thinks and thinks and thinks and comes up with a solution, not based on his reputation, because remember now, he's a mismanager. Remember now, he's an embezzler, so he cannot come up with a solution based on his reputation. So this is what he does. He comes up with a solution based on his master's reputation. The solution he comes up with is that he's going to trust in the master's mercy. And after all, this is a man who was so kind that he didn't even reprimand me when he let me go. He didn't demand repayment for what I've done. He didn't make a big fuss about it. Or he still fired me, but at least he didn't put me in jail. I know what I'll do, the manager said. I'll stake my entire future on the master's or on the owner's reputation, and this is what's going to happen. So as soon as he gets back to his office, it's time to put everything in a box and you're going to go. He finds one of the servants and says, well, I want you to bring all the people who owe money to the owner. And so the first tenant, farmer, shows up, and the manager pulls his contract out of the file and lays it down in front of him and says, quick, how much do you owe my master? And so the guy said, well, 800 gallons of olive oil. That's a lot of olive oil, by the way. And the manager told him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 400 or 450. Then he calls the next one. He lays his contract in front of him. Then he asked the second, and how much do you owe? And he said, 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. Well, take your bill and make it 800. One by one, the tenant farmers came. Everyone who owed money to the master came, and all their bills were reduced. Quick note on this, by the way. Reducing the debt meant lowering the interest rates, number one. Or the most probable scenario is that the manager cuts his own commission. When you're reading this parable, the first thing that probably will come to your mind is, how dare this manager, right, take money away from the master? Well, that's not really what he's doing. Because in that culture and during those times and up to now, when you say 1,000 bushels of wheat, it really isn't 1,000 bushels of wheat. On top of that is the commission of the manager. On top of that is huge interest rates. You guys remember the guy on top of the tree? And, everyone hates him. What is his name? Zacchaeus. Everyone's up on the tree and they hate him. Why? Because this is how much tax they owe. But when Zacchaeus collects from them, it becomes this big. That's just something that is normal. And so when the manager started taking out or reducing the bills of the people, really what he's doing is that he's drawing the interest, or this is bringing down the interest rate, or he's actually giving up his commission. And so the most probable scenario is the manager is cutting his commission, and this is a well-known thing. And as quick as he can, the manager gathers up all the contracts and dashes back to the master's office. And to those who understand how things worked in the Middle East culture, everything becomes clear at this point. The master can see what has happened. Those who had debt are throwing a party. The tenant farmers are probably throwing a party celebrating the name of their most generous landlord. I'm sure some of them have come to him and say, "Thank you, owner, for lowering down my debt. Thank you for reducing my debt." And those who had debt are, as I said, rejoicing for that. Never before in history has there been a man as wonderful, as kind, as noble, and deserving of loyalty as you are, master, because of what you have done. He turns to the manager, the owner, turns to the manager and says, "Shrewd move. Shrewd move. You are a rascal, but you're a wise rascal." And this sometimes is very difficult for the Western mind to grasp. But for the Eastern mind, reputation is everything. Reputation is everything. I listen to news and stories from Jet and how justice is being done over there. And always the number one thing is that the reputation of the Emiratis are gold. Not gold as in gold, the mineral. No, their reputation is number one. They can have little money, they can have no money, but their reputation needs to be sparkly clean. And so the manager built his reputation, his master's reputation. You're still with me? The manager built up his owner's reputation by painting him as a merciful man, which he is. This is a story about a master who's generous and merciful, and about a man, the manager, who has assets that are only at his disposal for a limited time. The question is, what does a person do with assets that are not his own? That is the question of this verse, of this story to us. What does a person do with assets that are not his own? Will he make the most of his only opportunity? While he has assets at his disposal, will he squander them? Or will he use them before they slip through his hands? Jesus is saying the shrewd move is to trust the master. Let me say that again. Jesus is saying the shrewd move is to trust the master. The shrewd move is to bet the farm on the generous and merciful character of the owner. And by the way, the word shrewd has a negative connotation sometimes. Sometimes the word shrewd to us will mean abusive or dangerous. And both these meanings are very archaic, very old in the meaning. But that's the old meaning. But the original language, actually, the word shrewd is actually wise, smart. And so let me go back to what Jesus said. Jesus is saying the wise move, the smart move, is to trust the master. To trust the master. Then Jesus concludes his teaching with 3 lessons from the story. Going back to verse 9, this is what it says. "I tell you, use your worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings." You can read that verse and draw so many things from that, so many different interpretations. But basically, the purpose of our wealth is to win a welcome. Is to win a welcome. One day in heaven, someone will walk up to you, I hope, and say, I just want to thank you for what you did and what you gave. I am here in heaven in part because of you. Many of us give because we think we have to, but we really don't want to give. Thinking about giving as an investment in the lives of those who will one day welcome you into eternal dwellings changes everything, doesn't it? Thinking about your giving as an investment in the lives of those who will one day welcome you into eternal dwellings changes everything. So be encouraged that when you give to the Lord, it's an investment in someone's salvation. That when you give to the Lord, it's an investment in someone's salvation. And according to the word, that's a shrewd move. That's a wise move. The second lesson Jesus teaches us at the end of the story is this. He says, whoever can be trusted with very what? Very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? Yesterday, I found on Facebook this little graphic that it's a man who's kneeling down and praying to the Lord and saying, Lord, I will, something like this, Lord, let me win the lottery so I can prove to you that it will not change me. Lord, let me win the lottery so that I can prove to you that it will not change me. And this statement is really based on these verses. Because what does Jesus say? Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. Maybe I haven't been trusted with very little, so I haven't been given much. Maybe the Lord knows exactly what's going to happen to me if I win the lottery. But something will change. And that is why I never win. And that is why that is never going to happen to me. What Jesus is saying here is treasures are a test. Your money is a test. And according to Jesus, how we handle His money is an act of faith. Will we trust Him with a little and receive a little? Or will we trust Him with a lot and receive a lot? The point Jesus is making is this. What you do with your money, and I wish you could just imagine. You don't have to do that. But I want you to pull your purses and your wallets and open up whatever cash you have there, all your credit cards and everything, or try to imagine your savings accounts and all that, and looking at the internet and looking at everything that you have. And according to Jesus, how we handle this is an act of faith. Will we trust Him with what He has given us, with that little, and receive a little? The point Jesus is making is this: what you do with your money determines how much more I will entrust you. If you respond well to the test of money, Pastor Jay, if you respond well to the test of money, I will entrust you with true riches. So how are we doing in passing the test or passing the money test? Jesus' final lesson is this: no servant can serve two masters, in verse 13. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. You either, and basically in a few words, this is what it says in verse 13. I master money or money masters me. I master money or money masters me. You cannot serve two masters. So you cannot be mastering the money and having control over that. And you can also obey the Lord and do that. You can't, he said. You cannot serve two masters. Many of us have tried and we just can't do it. We have to choose who our master will be. We have to choose who will choose to be your master. Or are you controlled, or are we controlled by our money? There's a simple challenge for all of us this new year. And I know we've made resolutions. We talked about that last week. We've made resolutions to read more. We've made resolutions to lose weight. We've made resolutions to take a class. We've made resolutions to be kinder and a better person with our relationships, with our family, with our friends. How about this? And this is how pastors lose their jobs. Commit to increasing your stewardship through giving and serving. Commit to increasing your stewardship through giving and serving. That's what stewardship is. Committing to give more. And managing whatever the Lord has given you by giving back to Him. Let us give serious thought to this question. What will you do with the things entrusted you? What will I do with the things entrusted me? Our time, our talents, our treasures are not actually yours. And I love it when pastors try to kind of shy away from the money part and they say, stewardship is really not just money, but more of your talents and your time. Stewardship is about money. Maybe the next board meeting, I will hear something from the board. But stewardship is about money. Pure and simple. Because I know you give your talents. I know you give your time. But what about your money? What about my money? Our time, our talents, our treasures are not ours. God gave us life. Our time is His. It's not ours. God gave us talents. They're on loan from Him. They will not stay here forever. And it is not mine. It is not yours. God gave us the capacity to earn. And all that you earn ultimately comes from Him. God has given me the capacity to earn. And all that I earn ultimately comes from Him because I'm a manager. You're a manager. He's the master. He's the owner. Wherever you are in managing your time, wherever you are in managing your time, wherever you are in managing your talents, and this is the biggest thing, wherever you are in managing your treasures, your savings accounts, your retirement, if you've never given, and this is going to be as awkward as it's going to be, but I'm going to say it. If you've never given to the Lord, give your first offering to the church and see what happens. I'm going to challenge you to do that. If you're a sometimes giver, decide today to become a regular giver. If you're a regular giver, determine to give the full tithe. If you're a tither, figure out how to excel more at the grace of giving. Stewardship is not just about money, I know. But sometimes in our lives, stewardship is all about money. You have time, you have talents that could be used for God. You have money that could be used for God's ministry. And His church that would also greatly encourage other people. And His church, that would also greatly encourage other people. When you give your tithes, when you give your time, when you give your talents, and you manage that properly, you're a shrewd manager, basing everything, putting everything, betting the farm on the graciousness and mercifulness of our Lord. The last verse I'm going to share with you today is something that we all know and rarely used, I think. Rarely used because, as I said, no one wants to talk about this in the terms of money. But I'm going to stand in front of you and courageously say, this is what the Lord is saying. Luke 6:38 goes like this. Give, and it will be what? Given to you. A good measure. He didn't say give a little, give some, give sparingly, give not that often, but He said give and it will be given to you. A good measure. A good measure. Pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Amen? Amen. Please stand and we're going to pray.